Misinformation. When you hear that word, your mind probably jumps straight to social media or maybe political polarization.
Right. You think about, state actors or online trolls.
Exactly. We see it as this social problem, a crisis of ethics, maybe. But what if that's not the core of it at all?
What if it's really just an economic problem?
A highly profitable, multi-billion-dollar economic problem. And the really wild part is that it's being powered completely by accident by the biggest, most trusted blue-chip brands in the world. We're talking Disney, Capital One.
It is the ultimate and I think darkest irony of the modern internet. I mean, we've built this system that's designed for hyper-efficiency, right? To get an ad in front of the perfect person.
Maximum reach.
Maximum reach. But that very same technology, it's created this powerful financial engine that just automatically rewards and promotes the most malicious, the most sensational, and frankly, the most dangerous content online.
It's an economy that literally runs on outrage and deception.
And critically, on obscurity. On nobody being able to see how it works.
Absolutely. So our mission today on the Deep Dive is to really unpack that perverse economic machine, what experts have started calling the disinformation economy.
Yeah.
We are going to follow the money. We're going to focus on this really opaque, automated system of programmatic advertising.
And ask the big question, how did we let this happen? How did the companies that sell us everything from, toothpaste to theme park tickets become the main unintentional financiers of all this digital chaos?
To really get it, I think you have to go back and see how big the shift was and how media works.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to grasp the scale of the landscape change. For, almost 2 centuries, quality media, newspapers, magazines, radio, it was all funded by direct ad sales and subscriptions.
The advertiser knew exactly where their ad was going. A car company brought a full page in a specific newspaper next to a specific section.
Exactly. The publishers had skin in the game, their reputation, the context of the ads, it all mattered.
But that entire model was it was financially starved by the digital revolution. The sources we look at, they show just how brutal that collapse was.
It was a bloodbath.
According to the U.S. Census Bureau, between 2002 and 2020, revenue for newspaper publishers just plummeted. We're talking a drop of 52.0%.
52%. That's half the industry.
And it wasn't just newspapers. Periodicals, the big magazines, they fell by over 40.5%. So half of this legacy industry's financial base it evaporated in less than 2 decades.
And that collapse, it didn't happen in a vacuum, right? It perfectly coincided with everyone moving online, especially to social media. That became the main place people got their news.
The numbers are staggering. Back in, 2012, 2013, only about 27% of Americans said they relied on social media for news.
Which seems so low now.
Right. Fast forward just 4 years to 2017, and that number had exploded to 51%. The eyeballs went online.
And the money had to follow the eyeballs. It always does.
And crucially, the main funding mechanism for all online content, whether it's, high-quality investigative journalism or a complete fabrication cooked up in a basement, it became programmatic online advertising.
And this is where we find what you could call the programmatic paradox.
Explain that.
Well, the paradox is sort of elegant in its cruelty. Programmatic advertising, it's a triumph of engineering. It's designed to connect a buyer, the brand, with a super specific user, efficiently, at scale, without needing human salespeople.
It promised ultimate precision.
It did. But the very complexity and the efficiency of that system created this invisible ecosystem. The technology that was supposed to deliver precise, effective advertising, it has instead made the accidental mass funding of malicious content pretty much economically unavoidable.
Unavoidable because the complexity basically allows for total ignorance on the part of the person paying the bills.
Exactly. It's often described as a chaotic Rube Goldberg machine.
I love that analogy.
It's perfect, right? It's incredibly complicated, thousands of moving parts, tons of middlemen, and it's totally opaque to the person who starts the whole process, the brand marketer just setting a budget.
Okay, so let's unpack that Rube Goldberg machine.
Right.
Because this is really where billions of dollars intended for, safe, reputable websites just vanish into the funding streams for hoax publishers.
And we need to be clear, this isn't some marginal part of the internet.
No.
Programmatic advertising is the vast majority of digital ad spending. It accounts for an estimated 60% of all online ads bought. Global spending is estimated to be over $300 billion in 2023.
So if you are on the internet, you are interacting with this system constantly.
Constantly. It is, and this is an exaggeration, it's the oxygen supply of the modern commercial internet.
And the mechanics of it are all built for insane speed. The whole ad placement process, it happens in the milliseconds between when you click a link and when the page actually loads. It's like a virtual financial flash mob.
And that speed is the key to the opacity. The whole process starts when an advertiser, let's say a big car company, sets a budget. They decide who they want to reach.
Super specific criteria.
Hyper specific. Male car buyers, 35 to 55, living in the Midwest who recently looked at SUVs, they plug all that data into a piece of software called a demand-side platform, or a DSP. The DSP is the buyer's agent.
So it's the AI proxy for the car company.
Exactly. Now, when you, the targeted user, load any web page, it could be a legitimate news site, a niche blog, or, and this is the key, a disinformation site. The ad space on that page is immediately put up for auction.
And that auction is handled by something else.
Right, by a supply-side platform, or SSP. The SSP represents the publisher, the website owner. These two platforms, the DSP and the SSP, they meet in a virtual ad exchange, and that's where the auction happens.
And this auction is instantaneous. It's all algorithms.
It's called real-time bidding, or RTB. The DSPs, which represent thousands of advertisers, all algorithmically bid these tiny fractions of their budget. We're talking less than a penny for the right to put an ad in front of your specific user profile.
The winning bid gets the spot.
The winning bid places the ad. And this entire thing involves multiple handoffs between different ad tech companies, all happening in a split second.
And this is it. This is the critical failure point. This is the element that makes the whole disinformation economy work so perfectly. The advertiser, the blue chip brand, they have zero visibility into almost all of these exchanges.
They are completely blind. When they set that budget in their DSP, they're basically just saying, go find user X and pay up to Y dollars to reach them wherever they are.
It doesn't matter where they are.
It doesn't. Stephen Brill, the founder of NewsGuard, he compared it to buying shares on a stock exchange that refuses to tell you which companies you're investing in. You're buying exposure to a specific demographic, a desirable user, but you are functionally blind to the content your brand is going to appear next to. The complexity, the sheer number of middlemen, it's all designed to obscure the final placement.
So the brands are literally stuffing money into a Rube Goldberg machine that nobody really understands. The cash just flows through so many hands that tracing it back to a bad actor becomes almost impossible for a typical marketing team.
And that anonymity is a hugely valuable commodity for the bad actors. They exist in this opaque chain where their specific content doesn't need to be approved by a human. It just needs to attract eyeballs that the DSPs consider valuable.
And this isn't just a theoretical problem. This is an active daily funding stream for some of the absolute worst content on the internet, and it's affecting the most famous brands you can imagine.
The sources we looked at detail this really specific, shocking real-world example. It involves a site called the Santa Monica Observer,
Which is notoriously a source of fabrications.
hugely a hoax site. In October 2022, they published this lurid and completely false story about the violent attack on Paul Pelosi, who was then the husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
And the article was just pure malicious disinformation.
Yeah.
It was created for engagement, for outrage.
And it worked. It went viral. It was amplified by influential people all across different platforms.
So what was sitting right next to this fabrication? This piece of content designed only to deceive people. This gets to the heart of the programmatic paradox.
Ads. Ads from huge, reputable brands. Hertz, Capital One, Lowe's, Petco, and Disney.
Disney.
I mean, think about that cognitive dissonance for a second. Disney, a company that is built entirely on trust and family values and protecting their intellectual property, was financially supporting a lurid political hoax.
And not because they chose to.
No, not at all. Simply because the programmatic machine decided that the users reading that hoax were highly desirable targets.
Their budget, sliced into these tiny little pieces, just followed the desirable eyeballs. It shows that in this system, the integrity of the content is completely secondary to the immediate financial gain of that single user transaction.
It's an efficiency at all costs mandate.
Yes.
The advertiser gets what they think is efficiency reaching that perfect user, but it comes at the direct cost of brand safety, brand reputation, and, the financial fueling of the very mechanism that is eroding civic trust.
They are paying for the destruction of the media ecosystem they claim to support.
Inadvertently, yes.
That sets the stage perfectly for our next segment. I mean, if the world's most sophisticated advertisers are getting burned like this, why hasn't the market corrected itself? Why does the system seem to structurally favor these hoax publishers?
And the answer, according to the experts we cite, is just staggering. It's because misinformation isn't a flaw in the system, it's a feature.
Feature.
Yeah. Well, if you really analyze the fundamental incentive structure of online media, it becomes immediately clear. Sensational, often false, or, highly polarizing content. It draws exponentially more user engagement than factual, balanced, complex reporting.
Which means more screen time, more comments, more angry emojis.
More reshares, and critically, more ad inventory viewed per session, more chances to sell an ad.
And engagement is the absolute #1 currency in ad tech. It's the key performance indicator, the KPI.
It's everything. If a user is highly engaged, and it doesn't matter if that emotion is outrage or agreement or fear, the time they spend on that page and the chance they'll click through, it makes the ad space next to that content more valuable in that split-second auction.
So the problem is fundamentally algorithmic. A legitimate news site might actually have a lower CPM, that's cost per mil or cost per 1,000 views, because their content is complex. It requires deep reading, which means fewer page views per hour.
Whereas a sensational site is engineered to trigger emotional responses. It leads to rapid consumption, quick sharing, high volatility, which drives up their perceived value to the programmatic systems.
Stephen Brill's testimony after he tried to sell his NewsGuard solutions to the social media giants, it really drives this point home. He realized these companies had no fundamental interest in actually fixing the problem.
He told this story, this anecdote, where a Facebook executive said to him, "Oh, thank God you can take us out of our misery," when he talked about solving the misinformation problem.
So they seem to want help.
They seemed to, but the deals never got made, and Brill finally concluded that misinformation and disinformation were not bugs, they were features. They were essential core components for driving the engagement metrics, the time on site, the controversy, the virality that fueled their massively lucrative business models.
That realization it's just so fundamental to understanding the disinformation economy. The very thing that makes the platforms successful is intrinsically linked to spreading falsehoods.
And it's reinforced by how ad buying prioritizes the user over the content.
What do you mean by that?
It's overwhelmingly driven by what's called behavioral targeting. Ad tech prioritizes profiling you, the user, over evaluating the website you're on. It's retargeting on steroids. If you are a desirable target, you have high disposable income, you're looking to buy a car, the system will follow your cookies everywhere you go online.
So if I'm a desirable user because of my spending habits, an advertiser who's just driven by efficiency will happily place an ad on a completely disreputable site if it means reaching me at a lower price than, say, on the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal.
Precisely. Advertisers realized they could reach these desirable users at a bargain price on these disreputable so-called long-tail sites compared to paying the premium price that premium publishers demand.
Publishers who invest in journalism and brand safety.
Right. The focus shifts entirely away from content quality to just the user's profile and the lowest possible acquisition cost. And this cheap reach creates a highly profitable environment for hoax publishers. It fuels what we call the noxious market.
Let's define that noxious market. It's not just a few bad apples slipping through the cracks. It's a systemic, lucrative incentive structure that's actually built for these hoax publishers.
Absolutely. The financial ecosystem doesn't just tolerate them, it funds their very existence. The data shows that the majority of traffic going to these harmful sites is explicitly available for monetization.
What does that mean in real numbers?
It means publishers representing a staggering 81.47% of the estimated traffic to known disinformation sites have successfully integrated into the programmatic ad marketplace. They are ready to sell ads.
That is a chilling statistic. 4 out of 5 times a user lands on a known disinformation site, that visit is ready to be monetized by a programmatic ad platform.
The system is designed for maximum liquidity, even if the product is poison.
And the incentives are perfectly aligned for the creators of that poison. Sensationalize, provoke, lie, use extreme rhetoric, because the algorithms will reward that heightened engagement with real advertiser dollars.
And the disinformation sites, they don't even need a huge volume of traffic. They just need highly engaged repeat visitors. And the programmatic machine is set up to monetize nearly every single impression they can generate.
So if this is such a clear economic incentive to pollute the ecosystem, Why don't the thousands of ad tech firms just police themselves? I mean, if one firm stopped funding disinformation, wouldn't others follow?
You'd think so, but it's a classic economic system failure. You could frame it as a prisoner's dilemma for ad tech.
Okay.
We're talking about an ecosystem with an estimated 3,000 different ad tech companies. Now, fighting fraud and improving brand safety, that requires immense resources. You need human reviewers, complex machine learning, auditing. All of that costs money, and it slows down the whole real-time bidding process.
So if one company invests all that money and time to block a shady publisher, what happens next?
Immediate financial loss. That shady publisher, they see they've been blocked by firm A, so they just turn to firm B or C or D, one of the other 2,999 firms, and they collect their revenue there.
So if one company does the right thing,
Another one will just step in and collect the money. In this hyper-competitive market where your profits rely on these short-term transactions, being ethical becomes an expensive competitive disadvantage.
it's a race to the bottom, and it's financially guaranteed by the complexity and the sheer number of players in the game.
Individual short-term decisions, I need to maximize my sales right now, they damage the collective long-term good of the entire internet. It's an economic externality problem of the highest order. The pollution is free for the polluters.
But the cost is borne by society, by democracy, and eventually by the very brands whose reputations are being damaged when their ads show up next to extremist content.
Exactly.
So if the structure is fundamentally flawed, if it's resistant to self-policing, we have to look for some kind of human intervention to restore context. So in our next segment, let's dive into the groups who are trying to bring some human oversight to this digital Wild West.
The realization that algorithms alone just can't discern quality or context, it led to the creation of groups trying to inject human intelligence back into this chaotic system. And one of the most prominent is NewsGuard.
Founded in 2018 by Stephen Brill and Gordon Krovitz.
Right. And their whole approach is rooted in traditional journalistic standards, which is this fascinating counterpoint to the algorithmic supremacy that defines everything else in the digital age. They're trying to reintroduce the human gatekeeper.
And they position themselves as a nonpartisan watchdog, but their methodology is the really key differentiator.
It is. They hire trained journalists, not algorithms, to report on and rate the reliability of news and information websites. They assign a score from 0 to 100, effectively creating a nutrition label for every information site a user might encounter.
Let's break down that scoring system, because understanding their criteria really shows what they consider to be quality journalism.
So every site starts at a perfect 100 points, and then deductions are made based on 9 negative criteria, all rooted in established journalistic principles. For example, the most severe penalty is for repeatedly publishing false news. That's a steep 22-point penalty.
What are some of the other things they look for?
Things like failing to handle content and disclosures responsibly, or not having a clear system for correcting errors, that's a 12.5-point deduction. So they're looking at the process and the impact, not the political viewpoint.
And that nonpartisan approach is absolutely critical to their mission. How do they prove they aren't just punishing one political side over the other?
Well, they point to their own data. It confirms their focus is on process, not politics. For instance, both the conservative Daily Caller and the liberal Guardian can score a perfect 100.
Because they both meet the fundamental criteria of transparency, correction, and evidence-based reporting.
Exactly. So NewsGuard's core product is licensing this human-driven, quality-controlled data. Advertisers and ad tech companies can feed these ratings into the programmatic ad buying process. It allows brands to implement brand safety based on verified journalistic standards, moving beyond just crude keyword blocking.
They're essentially selling a sophisticated navigational chart for this opaque programmatic sea. It allows brands to choose not just who they reach, but where they reach them.
Exactly right. But NewsGuard is focused on rating the content. Other organizations, they focus on the ethical responsibility of the advertiser themselves. And that brings us to the Conscious Advertising Network, or CAN.
And CAN operates from a totally different perspective. It's that brands must take control and accountability for their digital spending, just like they would for their physical supply chains.
Right. CAN is a voluntary coalition. It brings together brands, agencies, and tech providers. And their mission is to align advertising ethics with the realities of technology. They argue really forcefully that claiming ignorance just isn't an acceptable defense anymore.
The analogy they use is powerful. If you wouldn't buy cotton harvested by child labor, why would you allow your money to fund white supremacist content or medical hoaxes.
And the specific examples that Can has highlighted of where brand money is actually ending up are just alarming. They really show the scale of the problem.
They've shown clear evidence of major brands funding extreme content all over the world.
Right. Ads appearing next to white supremacist content or climate denial narratives. A particularly damning example involved ads funding the German-language version of Russia Today. Their content included headlines like, CO2 is harmless, which means CO2 is harmless.
Just propagating narratives against climate action.
And ads from major international companies like Iglo, Adobe, and Deloitte were found supporting this content. Can really stresses that hatred online isn't just speech. It is a full-blown economic model that relies entirely on monetizable outreach.
But the current tools that brands use for brand safety, they're often self-defeating. We're talking about these crude keyword block lists, right?
That's the widespread blunt force solution. Brands create these lists of words or phrases they absolutely do not want their ads to appear next to words like ISIS or kill or sensitive social topics.
The intent is good, protection.
The intent is protection, but the execution is disastrously flawed. These crude block lists often inadvertently demonetize entirely safe and legitimate minority voices and reporting.
And how significant is that unintended consequence?
It's massive. There's a striking statistic that shows 73% of safe LGBTQ plus content, and that's content deemed non-objectionable by human review, is rendered unmonetizable by these overly broad keyword exclusion lists.
So let's follow that logic. An advertiser blocks the word gay to avoid hate speech.
Right.
But in doing so, they simultaneously block a legitimate news site reporting on a pride parade or an LGBTQ plus political victory or critical health awareness. So in an effort to avoid offensive content, the tools they use actually punish and functionally silence legitimate marginalized voices.
It creates a chilling effect on quality reporting about sensitive topics. And what's more, this systemic failure leads to something critics call publisher tiering, where brand safety becomes a premium product.
How so?
Well, if the block lists are so crude, advertisers are basically forced to pay much higher rates to premium legacy publishers who can manually guarantee safety just to avoid this objectionable content.
But in turn, financially penalizes smaller, legitimate niche publishers who can't afford that level of manual review. It limits the democratizing potential of the whole system.
Precisely. And despite all these flawed efforts, the risk to the brands themselves remains massive and quantifiable. Research has shown that 23 top advertisers globally appeared on both highly trustworthy sites and known disinformation sites.
And consumers, they clearly penalize this failure. People are not forgiving when they see their favorite brands next to a hoax or hate speech.
Oh, not at all. Surveys confirm the danger. 62% of consumers say they will stop using a brand altogether if its ads appear next to low-quality content, including what they perceive as fake news.
So in an attempt to reach a targeted user for a bargain price, companies are risking their entire customer loyalty.
It's economic self-sabotage, and it's built right into the internet's core infrastructure.
Okay, if this financial machine is so destructive, we have to confront the giants that enable it. In our next segment, we need to discuss the outsized role of the major tech platforms, especially Google, and the institutional failures that keep this cash funnel flowing to disinformation sites.
You can't have this conversation without talking about Google. It's not just a player. It is absolutely central to this problem because of its overwhelming dominance in the programmatic ad space.
Not just as a publisher, but as an ad tech provider.
Exactly. If there's going to be any effective industry action to demonetize disinformation, it has to address the systems that Google operates.
The sources we looked at have called Google the primary financial facilitator for these bad actors.
They have. Craig Silverman, who's a fairly respected trade journalist, he called Google the financial engine for fake news. And that's primarily because their ad tech tools are the default choice for monetization, even for hoax publishers. The data backs this up.
What does the data say?
Google facilitated an estimated 26.9% of all revenue to 40 sites known to spread disinformation about U.S. elections. That's more than double the percentage of any other ad tech platform. They hold immense, unparalleled power over the flow of cash to these bad actors.
So why can't the industry or external auditors just track that money? Didn't the industry develop tools specifically for transparency, namely the ads.txt and sellers.json files?
They did. The Interactive Advertising Bureau, the IAB, they developed these tools starting in 2017 to fight fraud and inject transparency. They're supposed to be a verifiable digital ledger.
How do they work?
Well, ads.txt is a public file that a publisher hosts. It lists all the ad systems authorized to sell their space. And sellers.json is hosted by the ad tech system like Google or Trade Desk. And it lists all the publishers authorized to sell inventory through them.
So there's supposed to be a digital check and balance preventing fraud. Why are they working to stop disinformation funding?
Because of a massive systemic transparency gap created by the dominant player. Google is refusing to conform to the industry norm when it comes to the transparency settings in their sellers.json files.
Refusing how? What does that mean?
It means a shocking 72.9% of Google's sellers.json records are classified, or opaque. When a record is classified, the identity of the account selling the ad space is intentionally hidden.
73%. How does that compare to the rest of the industry?
It's a stark contrast. The industry average is about 0.5% of records being classified.
0.5% versus nearly 73%. That's an astronomical difference. So by classifying 3/4 of its sellers, Google is making it functionally impossible for anyone, auditors, researchers, even advertisers, to verify if a site selling ad space is legitimate or if it's a known disinformation outlet.
Precisely. That lack of transparency totally undermines the fraud-fighting tools, which were designed to confirm that the person selling the inventory is who they claim to be. And crucially, it makes it incredibly easy for disinformation sites to monetize their traffic by hiding their details in Google's massive sea of classified records.
They just blend in.
They blend in perfectly with legitimate but hidden, smaller publishers. If Google were to just make public records the default, which the industry average proves is totally feasible, it would dramatically constrict the monetization pipeline for disinformation by exposing the vast majority of these bad actors.
That opacity is the grease in the gears of the whole disinformation economy. But we also have to talk about how social media platforms themselves act as accelerators. They weaponize these narratives through algorithmic amplification, driving traffic to the sites that are then being programmatically funded.
They're the primary vehicles for virality, and their success is tied directly to the emotional content that drives polarization. The scale of this exploitation is hard to comprehend.
I mean, during the 2016 election.
Right. Facebook estimated 126 million users saw articles and posts that came from Russian sources. Twitter found over 2,700 accounts set up by Russian groups, tweeting 1.4 million times. The scale is just enormous, and the method of amplification is often mechanized.
Which brings us to bots.
Social bots. Highly sophisticated accounts designed to mislead, generate fake engagement, and manipulate the whole discourse. They are critical in driving virality and manufacturing a false consensus.
And we saw this play out during the pandemic.
Hugely. Recent studies on the COVID-19 pandemic showed that up to 66% of bots were focused on spreading health misinformation. They do this by strategically using certain keywords, interacting with influential accounts, and driving trending topics, which magnifies the influence of false information and makes it seem legitimate and widespread.
And the platforms are intrinsically incentivized to promote this kind of polarizing, viral content because it just maximizes screen time, which is their ultimate financial metric.
The algorithm prioritizes content velocity over factual accuracy. It's a feedback loop that drives the formation of echo chambers or information silos.
So when you're repeatedly exposed to information that just reinforces what you already believe.
You become polarized and you become resistant to any contrary factual evidence. The misinformation just circulates effortlessly within these closed loops, driving high engagement and further incentivizing the creation of more sensational, monetizable content. It's a vicious cycle.
Programmatic ad tech provides the fuel, and social media provides the algorithmic rocket booster.
That's a good way to put it.
That interconnected system leads us right to the real-world costs. So for our last segment, let's move beyond the abstract talk of ad dollars and really face the tangible, often dangerous effects of this disinformation economy.
And the costs are not just reputational or financial. They're tangible and they are dangerous, especially when it comes to public health. The COVID-19 pandemic was this devastating real-time case study on the lethal potential of misinformation when it gets scaled and monetized.
We are talking about actual deaths and outbreaks of preventable diseases.
Absolutely. The mass circulation of health misinformation fueled vaccine hesitancy all over the world. It led to the resurgence of diseases like measles in the US, the Philippines, and across Europe. And during the height of the pandemic, it led to dangerous self-medication. People are hospitalized for using livestock-intended ivermectin based on these false internet narratives.
The scope of belief in these false narratives, even after massive public health campaigns, it just shows how deeply this pollution has seeped into our civic infrastructure.
The evidence is pervasive. A Kaiser Family Foundation report found that about 78% of Americans either believe or are unsure about at least one false statement regarding COVID-19 or its vaccines.
78%.
That illustrates the fundamental success of the disinformation economy. It has integrated falsehoods into the daily understanding of 4 out of 5 citizens.
So if the problem is this pervasive, if it's structurally profitable and dangerous, what are the policy levers that experts believe can actually dismantle the economic incentives instead of just treating the symptoms?
Well, the policy proposals focus heavily on creating accountability where the current system shields it. And the biggest target remains Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act.
Right, the law that shields social media companies from civil liability for third-party content, the whole platform, not publisher defense.
Exactly. And the debate around Section 230 is incredibly charged politically.
So what specific changes are being recommended that could target the economic engine of this without, violating free speech principles?
Well, Brill and other legal experts propose conditioning Section 230 protection, so the immunity would no longer be absolute. One proposal is to condition immunity on platforms dropping their use of algorithms for content ranking and amplification.
So forcing them to go back to a neutral chronological feed.
Right. A second proposal is requiring them to integrate analytical tools like NewsGuard to actively inform users about the credibility of the sources they're seeing.
That's a powerful idea because it doesn't ban the content itself, but it interferes with the monetization and the amplification mechanisms.
But that, too, is politically contested. Extremely so. Many opponents see any condition on Section 230 as government-mandated censorship, even if the intent is just to promote transparency. And we've seen this tension play out, like the Republican inquiries into NewsGuard itself. The fight over transparency is deeply entangled with these polarizing political concerns.
Beyond the platform liability, what about the actors who are spreading the false content, the anonymous accounts and the bots that are driving the virality?
There's a growing proposal to end anonymity for commercial and political content creation. It would require meaningful proof of identity for users operating at scale. And the problem of fake accounts is substantial.
Especially during high conflict times.
Right. Shortly after the Israel-Hamas war began, one firm found that roughly 25% of accounts on major social platforms posting about the conflict appeared to be fake. Anonymity, in this context, is seen by many as just an invitation to industrial-scale mischief and foreign interference.
What about using existing laws, like consumer protection laws?
Experts suggest the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, could step up enforcement of existing consumer protection laws against unfair or deceptive acts. This would mean holding social media companies accountable for the broken promises in their own terms of service promises that often include policies against spreading harmful misinformation.
So if they fail to enforce their own rules, they could be held liable for deceptive business practices.
And that would hit them directly in the pocketbook.
Finally, we have to look to the future of information pollution, generative AI. The rise of this technology seems tailor-made to accelerate the economic success of disinformation.
Oh, it exacerbates the problem by drastically lowering the cost and increasing the speed of content creation. Before, creating high-quality, targeted disinformation like deepfakes or complex narratives, it required significant time and resources.
But now,
AI can easily create and disseminate vast quantities of highly personalized misinformation. It could enhance the ability to pollute the information ecosystem faster than any existing technological or human solution can clean it up.
so the arms race between those spreading falsehoods and those trying to verify information is just going to accelerate. And the economic barrier to entry for the hoaxers is now effectively zero.
Exactly. The sheer pace of change is a challenge for any legal framework. The profitable structure we've detailed today, where misinformation is a feature, has just been handed a massive, cheap, automated tool to generate content at industrial scale. It's only going to further destabilize the information environment.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We've tracked the money from blue-chip brands through this crazy Rube Goldberg machine and into the hands of hoax publishers. But the core takeaway is chillingly simple and, I think, highly actionable.
It is. The financial infrastructure of the modern internet, specifically programmatic ad tech and its deliberate opacity, especially with the classified records held by giants like Google, it provides a strong, self-sustaining economic incentive for the creation and spread of harmful, false content.
Brands are basically paying a massive, invisible tax to damage their own reputations and to destabilize civic discourse, all in the name of reaching a targeted user for a fraction of a penny.
They're funding the very engine that is polluting the digital world.
And the only way out, according to the experts we've reviewed, requires aggressive, systemic action.
True, industry-wide transparency, a massive dedicated investment in high-quality journalism to counteract all the noise. And on an individual level, a radical commitment to news literacy, to skepticism, and to following a diversity of sources outside your own echo chamber.
If you're an advertiser listening to this, you have to realize that you are not just buying an ad impression. You are funding the infrastructure that decides what content succeeds and what content fails online. And right now, the system is economically designed to reward the hoaxers.
It's a systems failure that is protected by deliberate complexity.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. The complexity of the ad tech supply chain is always cited as the reason this problem is so difficult to fix. But consider this. If the system were perfectly transparent, if Google's Sellers.json records were public by default, advertisers would immediately pull their money from known bad actors, starving the disinformation sites instantly. The financial opacity itself, the secrecy inherent in the Rube Goldberg machine, is the ultimate infrastructure that keeps the misinformation business viable. So what does it mean for the future of democracy when the financial system that powers the internet relies fundamentally on complexity and institutional ignorance just to survive?